Inozi's tears came without warning. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Chick. I was wrong. I was so frightened that I—" "You weren't wrong to want to protect our family," he said. He put his arms around her and held on. "You were scared. I understood that. I understood all of it." They sat on the floor of their one-room apartment in the small hours of the morning, holding each other, crying for different reasons that had wound together into the same reason, while Adana slept in the corner with her wrapper pulled up to her chin. 6 months later, Chick stood on a construction site in Lekki wearing a yellow hard hat and a vest with a company logo on the chest. He was no longer a taxi driver. He was a trainee site supervisor, learning how buildings rose from the ground one decision at a time. He worked 12-hour days. He studied at night. He asked questions until the engineers around him got mildly tired of answering, and then he asked more. He learned the language of blueprints and load tolerances and soil composition. He learned it the way a man learns something when he understands that his family's future is the reason for every page he turns. One afternoon, Obiora visited the site without announcement. He found Chick standing with the lead engineer over a set of drawings, pointing at a measurement that didn't match the construction specifications. "Right there," Chick was saying. "The number on the drawing is different from what's on the ground." The engineer looked, then looked again. "You're right," he said, with the particular surprise of someone who didn't expect to be corrected. "Good catch." Obiora watched from a distance. Later, he called Chick into the site office. "You're doing well." "I'm trying, sir. I want to tell you something I didn't tell you that night you came to my house." Obiora leaned back. "The Lebanese businessman, the one who helped my father, he died 10 years ago. But before he died, he called me to his bedside. He told me something." "What did he say, sir?" "He said that the day my father returned his money was the day he learned something he had never forgotten. He said, integrity cannot be purchased. It can only be recognized. And when you recognize it, you invest in it." Obiora looked at Chick steadily. "That is what I am doing with you, Chick. I am investing in your integrity. Because men who have it are rare, and rare things are worth more than they cost." Chick's throat tightened. "I won't let you down, sir." "I know you won't." 3 years after the night of the briefcase, Chick stood in front of a house in Ejigbo. 3 bedrooms. A small yard with a gate that actually locked. It wasn't large by any measure that a man like Obiora would recognize, but it was his, paid for with money he had earned, not taken. Inozi stood beside him, healthy, the surgery long behind her, the lump that had terrified them both removed and gone. Adana, 10 years old now, ran through the empty rooms deciding which one would be hers, her voice bouncing off walls that still smelled of fresh paint. That evening, after Adana had gone to sleep in her own room for the first time in her life, Chick and Inozi sat on their small balcony. "Do you ever think about that night?" Inozi asked. "Every day." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd kept the money?" Chick considered it honestly. "We would have survived. Maybe for a year, maybe 2. But eventually it would have run out and we'd have been back where we started, except we'd have done something we couldn't take back." He paused. "Because I returned it, we didn't just survive. We changed. Everything changed." Inozi rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "I'm proud of the man you are." Inside the house, Adana slept in her own bed, in her own room, in a house her father had built not by taking something that didn't belong to him, but by giving back what did. And somewhere across the city, behind 12-foot walls, Obiora Admi sat in his study and thought about his father, about a taxi driver in Surulere who had returned a bag he didn't have to return, and about the invisible thread that connects one generation's integrity to the next generation's opportunity. About how character moves through time like that, carrying what it carries, arriving in unexpected places. The briefcase was never the real test. The real test was what Chick chose to do in the dark, in the silence, with no one watching and nothing stopping him. The reward was not what he received. It was who he became. Chick didn't just return a briefcase that night. He returned to the man his father had spent 15 years quietly building him to be. And in doing so, he gave his daughter the one thing that no amount of money, taken or earned, could ever fully replace. A father whose name means something. Because here is what most people misunderstand about wealth. It is not only what you accumulate. It is also what you refuse to compromise to get it. The account you keep with yourself, in the moments when no one else is keeping count, is the account that determines everything else. The question this story leaves you with isn't whether Chick made the right choice. It's whether you know what you would have done, sitting in that taxi with the briefcase in your lap, your wife's health on the line, your daughter asking questions you don't want to have to answer, and 1 million naira sitting in your hands with no witnesses and no consequences. Character is not what you perform when people are watching. It's what you choose when they're not. And that choice, quiet, private, made in a flickering light on an empty street, is the only inheritance that doesn't depreciate. If this story made you sit with something you needed to sit with, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, stories about ordinary people who made extraordinary choices in the moments that actually counted. And leave a comment with one word that describes what you would have done that night. Because your answer matters. Not to anyone else. To you. Mama Chitty raised an eyebrow from the doorway. What happened? That coconut tree fought back. One day, Mama Chitty said, with the patience of someone who had said this many times, you will fall from those trees. Neka winked at the children. If I fall, at least I will land beside food. It was on an evening like that one, walking back through the forest after a long day, stomach thinking loudly, that Neka saw something that stopped her completely. Through the trees, standing where no ordinary village building had any business standing, was a mansion. Not a large village house. Not a compound with aspirations. A mansion, the kind that seemed to have arrived from somewhere significantly more expensive than rural North Carolina. White walls that actually reflected sunlight. Glass balconies. Tall iron gates with the kind of hardware that looked like it had opinions about security. And inside the compound, visible through the bars, fruit trees. Mango. Orange. Avocado. Coconut. Even apple trees, which in this village was practically a foreign concept. Neka's mouth opened slowly. She stepped closer to the fence. Every tree was full. Heavy with ripe, unpicked, utterly unsupervised fruit. And she could see no guards. No workers. No activity of any kind. She placed both hands on her waist and stared at the bounty before her with the expression of someone confronting a moral dilemma and already losing. Then she sighed dramatically. If the owner of this house is not eating these fruits, she said to no one in particular, then God clearly wants someone responsible to step in and help. Her eyes moved from the fence to the mango tree. From the mango tree to the fence. Her stomach growled so loudly it was practically a vote. Neka rubbed her chin. Considered. Reconsidered briefly. Then grinned. Let the mango rescue operation begin. And before common sense could organize itself into a proper objection, she grabbed the fence and started climbing. She did not know, as she scaled that gate with the ease of long practice, that the owner of the mansion had already begun the journey back from the city. And that within the hour, her mango mission would become the most consequential, unexpected, and thoroughly unplanned moment of her entire life. Because sometimes love begins in strange places. And in this particular story, it began with a stolen mango and a girl falling out of a tree. The garden behind the tall iron gate was, by any measure, remarkable. Mango trees swayed in the afternoon heat. Coconut palms stood like sentries. Orange trees bent slightly under their own abundance. Avocado branches had learned to curve toward the earth with the patience of things that had been growing a long time. And right in the middle of all of this, perched on the thickest branch of the largest mango tree with her feet swinging freely in the air, sat Neka, self-appointed minister of fruit inspection and very much at home. In her hand was a mango of exceptional quality. Golden. Perfectly ripe. The kind of mango that makes you briefly forget whatever else was going on in your life. She took a long, deeply satisfied bite. Closed her eyes. Then looked at the mango again with genuine admiration. You deserve an award, she told it. Who planted you? Let me greet the person. She took another bite. Juice ran down her fingers. She licked it off immediately. No wasting of resources. A squirrel appeared on a nearby branch and regarded her with the blank assessment of small animals. "Good afternoon, neighbor," Neka said politely. Then, when the squirrel continued to stare, "Don't look at me like that. This tree belongs to everybody. Spiritually." She sighed happily and leaned back against the branch. "This is the best office I have ever worked in." What she did not know was that her boss had just arrived. Outside the mansion gate, 3 black luxury SUVs came to a slow, unhurried stop. The kind of vehicles that travel with certainty. The gate opened automatically and the convoy rolled inside with the particular quiet authority of serious money. In the back seat of the first car sat Francis Ura, 30 years old, broad-shouldered, smooth dark skin, the kind of jaw that artists paint from memory. A man who looked like he had been born at a comfortable distance from poverty and had spent his adult years making sure that distance increased. Francis owned companies in 3 cities, hotels in 2 countries, and enough of the financial landscape to make bank managers rearrange their posture when he walked in. He was, by most measurable standards, doing extremely well. He also looked exhausted. The city had been relentless lately. Meetings stacked on top of meetings. Investors with competing visions and matching egos. Phone calls that arrived before he'd finished the last cup of coffee and continued until long after he'd been ready for bed. He had come to the village mansion seeking the thing that no amount of money could schedule directly: quiet. His driver opened the door. Francis stepped out and stood still for a moment. Fresh air. The sound of birds in trees rather than notifications on a screen. The slow, unhurried pace of village afternoon. He let out a long breath. Smiled slightly. This place is peaceful. His phone rang. He checked the number, already knowing. There was only one person in his life who called with exactly that frequency and that certainty of being answered. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Yes, Mama." Her voice came through like a warm explosion. "Francis, have you arrived safely?" "Yes, Mama." "Are you sure?" "Yes, Mama." "You didn't drive too fast?" "No, Mama." "Did you eat today?" "Mama, I just arrived." She ignored this completely. "Listen carefully, Francis." He closed his eyes. Those 2 words were a reliable signal that something uncomfortable was about to follow. "You are 30 years old." Here it came. "You need a wife. While you are in that village, find a good woman and marry her." Francis began walking slowly through the garden, the phone held to his ear. "Mama, I came here to rest." "You will rest with your wife." Her voice gained momentum. "You think I don't know your taste? All those city women with their long nails and short attention spans. This time you will find a proper woman." Francis stopped walking. He had, without particularly planning to, arrived directly beneath the largest mango tree in the garden. "Mama, please." "Before you come back to the city," she said firmly, "you must be married. Or at least engaged. I am not negotiating." He opened his mouth to respond. And at that exact moment, something small and golden fell past his face and landed with a soft, deliberate plop beside his shoe. He looked down. Then slowly he looked up. On the branch directly above him, a girl was sitting with a half-eaten mango in her hand and an expression on her face that cycled rapidly. Francis blinked. On the phone. "Francis, are you listening to me?" He was not. He was staring at a mango thief sitting in his tree as though she had personally rented the branch. Neka's mind was working very fast. She ran through her options. Jump and run? Pretend to be a bird? Simply become invisible? None of these skills were available to her. Then the branch shifted under her weight, and the choice was made for her. "Ah!" She screamed as her feet slipped. She grabbed for the branch, missed, and then, the fall, the moment of air and regret, and then impact. Francis had dropped his phone the instant she screamed. He stretched his arms out without thinking, the way you catch something that matters before you've decided it does. She landed in them with a solid thud. Everything went very quiet. Neka looked up at him. He looked down at her. They were closer than either had intended. Close enough to feel each other's breath. Close enough for him to notice that her eyes were extraordinary, warm and bright and completely unafraid, despite the situation. close enough for her to notice that he smelled expensive and was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You caught me," she said. He blinked. "Yes. I mean," she cleared her throat, "you caught me stealing." A muscle at the corner of his mouth moved. He placed her carefully on the ground. Nneka immediately dropped to her knees in a spectacular bow. "My lord," she said, raising both hands toward the sky. "Please forgive me. I came in peace. You broke into my house. I came for mango diplomacy." She held up the remaining half of the mango as evidence. "Mango diplomacy. Hunger negotiations," she clarified. He almost laughed. He could feel it trying to happen. "How did you get into the compound?" She pointed to the fence. "The fence? You climbed my fence?" "Yes." "Then climbed my tree?" "Yes." "And stole my mango." She looked at the mango in her hand, then back at him. Then she held it out. "Would you like what's left?" Francis Ora, a man who had negotiated with international investors, sat across boardroom tables from people with 9-figure net worths, and had not laughed with full sincerity in longer than he could honestly remember, burst out laughing. Deep, real, completely undignified laughter. He laughed until he had to wipe his eyes. When he could speak again, "What is your name?" "Nneka." "And why exactly are you stealing fruit, Nneka?" She dropped the remaining mango performance and looked at him plainly. "I was hungry," she said. Her voice had gone quiet. The comedy stepped aside for a moment and let something true come through. "I am an orphan. I live alone. And your trees had more fruit than any 10 people could eat." He studied her face for a moment. Then, "Stand up." She stood slowly. "You're not in trouble." Her eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Something lit up in her face like a window with the shutters suddenly thrown open. "God bless you." Then she added, with the speed of someone seizing an opportunity, "If you ever need fruit quality inspection services, I am available. Very affordable rates." He shook his head, the smile still there. "Go home, Nneka." She nodded, started walking toward the gate. Then stopped and turned around. "Your mango," she called back, "is very sweet." "Thank you," he said. "Tell whoever planted it," she said, seriously, "that they are a genius." She walked out through the gate with the particular ease of someone who has absolutely no regrets, and Francis stood alone in his garden watching her go. He had been in Umuaka for approximately 20 minutes. He had not had a moment of quiet, and he was smiling in a way he had not noticed until just now. That night, in his bedroom with its imported furniture and soft lighting and the kind of silence that expensive walls create, Francis stared at the ceiling and thought about a mango thief. He turned to the left. He turned to the right. He sat up. "This is ridiculous," he said to the room. He pointed at himself. "I run companies worth billions. I negotiate contracts with people who have private planes." He sighed. "And today I spent 10 minutes being charmed by a girl who called it hunger negotiations." He lay back down. Sleep eventually found him. And in the dream, he was walking through the garden again. The mango tree stood tall and Nneka was on the branch, waving. "Welcome back, mango landlord." He crossed his arms. "You're stealing again." She shrugged. "Research continues." She jumped down from the tree, but this time she landed gracefully. She walked toward him. Closer, closer. Her eyes were bright in the warm light. "You should eat mango too," she said softly. He woke up abruptly at 2 in the morning, breathing like he had been running. He stared at the ceiling. Then he said, to no one, "I am dreaming about a fruit thief." He lay there for a long while, not sleeping, not entirely awake, and slightly annoyed at himself. Early the next morning, Francis walked through the garden. The sunlight was just arriving, laying itself across the grass in long warm strips. Birds called from the tall trees. The air was the particular freshness of before the village woke up, when everything is still possible. He walked toward the mango tree, and something on the ground caught his eye. A small, colorful scarf, the kind that gets tied around the head or used to carry things, lying in the dirt near the trunk. He picked it up, stared at it, then looked up at the mango tree with a slow, private smile that he would have denied if anyone had seen it. He found her 3 days later, quite by accident. He had decided to follow a narrow path toward the stream where villagers came to wash clothes, wanting something to do with his hands that wasn't a phone call. He heard splashing water and birds, and then he came around the bend in the path and saw her. Neka stood in the shallow water at the stream's edge, her wrapper tied at her waist, her head uncovered, scrubbing clothes against a rock with the focused energy of someone who does this work as a matter of survival. She was humming something, tuneless and happy, the kind of sound people make when they're not performing for anyone. Francis leaned against a tree and watched her. He had not meant to stop. He had simply, without entirely deciding to, stopped. She felt it before she turned around. The way certain people can feel attention even from behind. She stopped scrubbing, straightened, and turned. When she saw him, her eyes went wide for just a moment. Then, "Good afternoon, Mango Landlord." He walked closer and sat on a large rock at the water's edge. "You left something at my house." Her eyes widened. "My dignity?" "No." He raised the scarf. "My scarf." She climbed out of the shallows quickly and took it from him, examining it as though checking for damage. "I thought the forest spirits had it." "You left it under the tree." She nodded seriously. "That tree causes too many problems." The pause. Then she looked at him with the particular directness that seemed to be her natural mode of looking at things. "You laugh a lot when you're around me." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a complaint?" "No." She smiled. "It means I'm doing my job well." "What job?" "Making people remember they're alive." There was a beat of quiet in which Francis thought that was, possibly, one of the most honest things anyone had said to him in a long time. They talked for much longer than either of them had planned. Neka told him about the forest, about climbing trees, about Mama Chitty and the children who descended on her like small enthusiastic storms every time she arrived with fruit. She told him about the villagers who had decided she was a witch, which she treated as a point of pride rather than an insult. Francis laughed so hard at the bird on the roof story that he nearly fell backward off his rock. "You, a witch?" he managed. She nodded gravely. "Yes." "What kind of witch climbs trees for mangoes?" "The hungry kind," she said. "We are a very specific category." He wiped his eyes. And as he looked at her again, something settled in his chest that he didn't immediately have a name for, something warm and quiet and slightly alarming in its unfamiliarity. He didn't notice the two village girls who had paused on the path above the stream, their water buckets forgotten, their eyes wide and their expressions darkening with every minute they watched the billionaire laugh with the girl from the forest. By evening, the story had spread through every corner of Amuka. When the sun began to drop, Francis stood up. "I should go." Neka nodded. "Before the village begins writing the script." He smiled. "Too late." "Then let them write," she said, with a shrug that contained no particular concern. He looked at her for a moment. Then quietly, "I'll see you again." She tilted her head. "Are you coming for another mango inspection?" "Yes." "Good," she said, grinning. "Because the mango research department is always open." He walked away laughing. And as he went, he didn't notice, because he was too busy smiling, that his heart was beating slightly faster than usual, and that a voice somewhere deep and honest inside him was saying something he wasn't quite ready to hear yet. 3 days later, he found her walking along the roadside carrying an empty basket. He slowed the car beside her and rolled down the window. "Miss Mango Thief." She turned. "Mango Landlord." She looked at the car, then back at him with equanimity. "Are you following me?" "Where are you going?" She looked into the empty basket. "The market." "What are you buying?" She looked into the basket again. "Possibly some food to go with it." He laughed. "Come to dinner tonight. At the mansion." She stared at him the way one stares at an invitation to an impossible thing. "Dinner? In that palace?" "Yes." She pointed at herself. "Me?" "Yes." "Should I bring climbing equipment?" "No equipment. Just come." She thought about it for precisely 3 seconds. Fine. But if I see the mango tree, I cannot promise anything. He drove away still smiling. And 3 village girls standing nearby, who had witnessed the entire exchange, turned to each other with faces that had gone several shades darker. That evening, Neka stood outside the mansion gate and looked at the building the way tourists look at historical monuments, with awe and the slight suspicion that they don't entirely belong here. This house, she whispered, is bigger than the village meeting hall. Inside, the dining table gleamed under soft golden light. The food was plentiful in a way that made Neka go briefly still. She leaned toward Francis and whispered, "Are we expecting other people?" "No. This is for us." She sat back slowly. "Rich people are living very well," she said, with a kind of wonder that was entirely without envy. Between bites, she talked. She complimented the rice. She had deep thoughts about the grilled chicken. She asked, seriously, whether she would be arrested for eating too much, and when he told her no, she relaxed in a way that was visibly complete. "Your mango tree," she announced at one point, "is still the best part of your compound. Just so you know." After dinner, they moved to the living room and the conversation stretched into the night without either of them working to extend it. It simply moved at its own pace, unhurried, the way conversations go when both people are actually listening. When Neka finally said it was late and she should go, Francis looked out at the dark road that lay between the mansion and her small house. "Stay in the guest room tonight," he said simply. "It's dark and the road is long." The guest room was so spectacular it stopped her in the doorway. The bed alone was larger than the room she had grown up in. The white linens had the look of things that had never met ordinary dust. The curtains pooled on the floor. The air smelled of flowers and something expensive she couldn't name. Neka turned in a slow circle. "Even the pillows look like they went to school," she said. The maid smiled and left. Neka approached the bed with the caution of someone handling an unfamiliar animal. She poked the mattress with one finger. It accepted her touch with a gentle, bottomless give. Her eyes went wide. "This bed," she said, "is dangerous." She sat down. The mattress enveloped her in a way that felt personal. She stood back up immediately. No wonder rich people never want to leave their houses. After some consideration of the marble floor, which she deemed too grand for sleeping on, she carefully climbed in. "If I break this bed," she muttered to herself, "I will simply run before morning." Down the hallway, Francis was not sleeping either. He laughed. She ate. Then she looked at him with great seriousness. "You know what I realized tonight?" "What?" "If you had offered me food on the first day," she said, "I would never have stolen your mango." She paused. "You brought this on yourself." He was laughing when she walked back to the guest room, and he was still smiling long after the hallway had gone quiet again. The next morning, Neka was up before the birds had finished deciding whether the day was worth announcing. She wrapped her scarf, slipped out of the guest room, moved through the mansion with absolute silence, and reached the gate before the security guard had his second cup of tea. "You're leaving early," he observed. "Before the village reporters wake up," she said, and disappeared into the road. She was too late. By mid-morning, Umuaka was buzzing with the news that the girl who climbed trees had spent the night at the billionaire's mansion. At the well, girls with water buckets were conducting an emergency analysis of the situation. "She spent the night. I saw her leaving this morning with my 2 eyes. That tree climber thinks she can become a rich man's wife. He can marry anyone from the city. Why would he choose her?" The questions had no satisfying answers, which was the most infuriating part. Because something was clearly happening, and it was happening to Neka, and no amount of commentary could stop it. Back at the mansion, Francis stood alone in the garden under the mango tree. The compound was quiet in a new way, not peaceful but empty. He looked around. He looked up at the branch where she had been sitting, comfortable as a bird, on the day he met her. He realized quietly, been in Umuaka for nearly a week. He would need to return to the city soon. The thought sat uncomfortably. When the convoy finally pulled out of Umuaka 3 days later, Francis sat in the back seat of the lead SUV watching the village road shrink behind him. He had meant to feel relieved. He had needed rest, and the city needed him. This was the natural order of things. He felt instead like he had left something behind. Back in the city, his enormous house was perfect. Marble floors, chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows. Staff who moved silently and efficiently. A kitchen that produced meals without drama. A bedroom that cost more than most village compounds. Everything exactly as it should be. And yet, he turned left in the enormous bed. Turned right. Sighed. The next day in the boardroom, a manager was presenting quarterly projections on a large screen. Sir, if we execute this contract, our profit margin increases by 20%. Francis interrupted. Do mango trees grow in the city? Silence. Every executive in the room looked at him. The manager blinked. Sir? Francis cleared his throat. Continue. His assistant leaned toward a colleague. Where is our boss right now? The colleague thought about it. Somewhere in a mango tree, he said, at normal volume. His mother came for tea that evening and looked at him for a long moment before saying anything. You look unwell. I'm fine, Mama. You're lying. He stood up and found something to do on the other side of the room. She waited. Then, did you meet someone in the village? He didn't answer. My son, she said warmly, with the unhurried certainty of a woman who has been right before. You are in love. His silence said what his words would not. One morning a week later, his assistant walked into the office to find him sitting at his desk staring at a mango he had placed in the center of the desk. Just staring at it. The assistant stopped in the doorway. Sir? I think I am sick, Francis said. Should I call a doctor? No doctor can cure this. What kind of sickness is it? Francis leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. The kind that lives in a village. That evening he stood up from his chair with sudden decision. Prepare the convoy. His assistant blinked. Sir? We're going back to the village. The pause. To find the mango girl. The convoy rolled back into Umuka the next morning with the same unhurried authority it had arrived with weeks before. Villagers stopped what they were doing and stared. Word moved from compound to compound at the speed that only important things travel in small villages. The billionaire has come back. Francis stepped out of the car and said simply, Find Neka. The bodyguards dispersed. No one had seen her recently. Mama Chitty, when approached, shrugged and said the girl had gone to the forest. In the forest, Neka was halfway up a fruit tree, dropping oranges into a basket below, singing something to herself. Today we eat like queens. Then she heard footsteps. Many of them. She froze. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices calling her name. Her eyes went wide. She jumped down. I knew this day would come. She started running. I am innocent. Behind her, the bodyguards followed through the brush. Then one of them shouted, Francis sent us. Neka froze. Turned slowly. You mean the mango landlord? Yes. She thought about this for a moment. Oh, she said and stopped running. When they brought her out of the forest, Francis was already standing beside the car. He saw her emerge from the trees with leaves in her scarf and a basket of oranges, and something in him that had been out of position since he'd left the village settled quietly back into place. He walked toward her. Without quite deciding to, he pulled her into a hug, the kind that holds rather than greets. She went still with surprise. Then, you came all the way from the city. For me? Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, then your mango problem is very serious. Come with me, he said. To the city. She looked at the convoy. She looked at him. She took in the situation with the particular unhurried assessment of someone who has always had to calculate their options carefully. Then she shrugged. If the city has fruit, I am ready. The village, watching the convoy drive away with Neka inside, processed this information with varying levels of acceptance. One jealous girl nearly screamed. Another crossed her arms and hissed. But an old woman at the roadside laughed to herself and said, loud enough to be heard by everyone nearby, I told you girls. The mango thief was going to become queen of the garden. At Francis's city mansion, Neka stepped out of the car and looked up at a building that was, in fact, larger than she had words for. This house, she said quietly, is bigger than the entire village. Welcome home, Francis said. At the front door, his mother was waiting. She had the look of a woman who had been right about something for a long time. She looked Nneka over carefully. The simple wrapper, the bare feet, the bright eyes that didn't look down even under examination. Then she smiled and opened her arms. So this is the girl who stole my son's heart. Nneka blinked. Mama, I only stole Mango. His mother laughed and hugged her like she had always known her. The mansion changed with Nneka in it. Laughter arrived in rooms that had been quiet for years. She cooked with Mama whenever she visited, and the kitchen smelled like something real. She played with the children who came with visiting relatives. She called things by their right names and said what she meant without strategy or calculation, which was, Francis realized, one of the most rare and difficult things in his world. One evening they stood together on the balcony watching the city lights spread below them. Nneka looked up at him. You smile more now. He looked at her. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, the way you touch something you want to make sure is real. That's because of you. Her heart beat faster. The city below them continued its distant noise. And there on the balcony, in the warm light, he leaned toward her and she leaned toward him, and they met in a kiss that was soft and certain and unhurried, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it already knows where it belongs. When the trouble came, it arrived with the particular drama that certain kinds of jealousy generate. Vanessa, Francis's former girlfriend, beautiful and expensively put together and equipped with the absolute confidence of someone who has never been told no by anyone who mattered, appeared at the mansion door and walked in like the building already knew her. I came to see my fiancé, she said, to anyone who would listen. From the top of the staircase, Francis's voice arrived before his footsteps did. Ex-fiancé. Vanessa froze. Then she saw Nneka standing beside him. Her eyes narrowed. Nneka folded her arms. Yes, she said pleasantly. The same village girl. Francis walked down the stairs and stood beside Nneka and took her hand. Not for show. Not as a statement. Simply because it was where his hand naturally went. Tell me this is a joke, Vanessa said. It isn't, Francis said. This is my future wife. The room went quiet with the specific silence of something that has just become irrevocable. You chose her, Vanessa said, the word landing with disbelief. Over me? Francis looked at Nneka for a moment before he answered. Then, to Vanessa, you chose my money. She chose my heart. His mother, from across the room, began to clap slowly. Well said. Vanessa left the way only truly dramatic people leave, in a storm that doesn't quite make rain. That evening, Francis took Nneka into the mansion garden. Candles had been placed among the trees, and soft music moved through the warm air, and the whole compound looked like something a person might arrange when they had finally made up their mind about something important. Nneka turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. What is all this? Francis knelt down. She looked at him. Her hand went to her mouth. Nneka, he said. The day I caught you falling out of my mango tree, I thought you were just a strange and hungry girl who had climbed into the wrong garden. He paused. I was wrong. You are the most genuine person I have ever met. You walked into my life with no agenda, no performance, no calculation. You showed me what it looks like to be alive without apology. He opened the small box in his hand. The ring caught the candlelight. Will you marry me? She covered her face with both hands. Her eyes were full. Then she dropped her hands. Yes, she said. Yes, Francis. He slipped the ring on her finger and stood and lifted her up, and they both laughed the way you laugh when something wonderful is happening and you can't quite hold it all at once. The wedding was held months later, attended by the city and the village in equal measure, relatives from Charlotte in their good clothes alongside Umuaka elders in their finest wrappers, children running between the formal legs of suited guests, Mama Chitty laughing so loudly the wedding band periodically paused to let her finish. The jealous girls from the village stood together at the edge of the celebration. One of them sighed. So it really happened. Another said, quietly enough to suggest she actually meant it, if only I had greeted him first. Francis, walking past, heard them. He smiled without stopping. under a sky full of the evening's first stars, with the celebration music reaching up into the warm night air, Francis held his wife's hand and said, "You know my life will never be ordinary again." Nneka looked up at him. "Good," she said. "Ordinary is boring." He laughed. She laughed. His mother watched from nearby with the particular contentment of someone who knew all along. "From a village forest to my heart forever," Francis said quietly, just for her. "And from a mango tree to true love," she answered. They kissed as the music played on, and somewhere back in Amuka, an old woman sitting on her porch in the dark said to no one in particular, "I told them. The mango thief was going to become queen of the garden." She laughed softly to herself. And she did.